Good morning and welcome to the Hobby Breakfast Show. We went to a tournament and now we're going to talk about it. I'm joined today by Mayor.
Hello.
Sebastian.
Hello.
Chef.
Hello.
And Onod.
Hello.
Okay, I'm OT. Initially, how did we find the tournament? I'm going to come to Sebastian first. How did you find the tournament?
It was a really fun tournament. Yeah, I mean most of Ian's events are really good, really fun, great terrain, great people, good community. Yeah, had a lot of fun.
Excellent vibes. Cool. To be honest, we're going to be slightly pressed for time in this fucking recording because we've got 20 games to go through. So without further ado, we're going to quickly run through like the sort of structure of the tournament and how it ended up playing out, and then we'll come on to each of our games individually and we'll talk about how they went. This will be quite rapid fire because we've got quite a lot to go through, but yeah, we'll just try and give an overview of how it went. So firstly, the scenarios that got rolled, I think these got announced, was it 2 or 3 days before, and people were able to practice them basically?
I think it was the Thursday it was released.
Yeah, cool. So the 4 scenarios were capture and control, to the death, destroy the supplies, and reconnoiter. I think not ideal for some of the lists that we brought. I think maybe we were hoping for a few more killy scenarios than the sort of more objective-based ones. I think the combination of capture and control and recon really crippled a couple of lists, but yeah, well, I imagine we'll come on to that a bit later. There were either 32 or 34 players, we're not entirely sure which, 4 rounds, and it was a GBHL 80. We're going to go through the sort of results in the order we predicted them, so going from best to worst. And our worst prediction was actually for Onod. So, Onod, do you want to take us through game 1 and game 2 in depth tactical breakdown?
Do I?
I don't know.
So the first game, capture and control, I got drawn on top table.
What's your list first of all? Should we quickly recap our own list?
Go watch the old video, you fucking noobs. Jeez. We get double the views then. Come on now.
Yeah. It wasn't good.
Yeah, so playing against Florian. And I won, and it was a really good game. The guy I was playing against was really nice. I think basically he, was overly optimistic about how his force would do against mine. I think that was the theme. If I won a game, I think my opponent underestimated me, and if I lost the game, he didn't. Was that way.
Okay.
So yeah, I ended up just sort of powering my guys into the middle. He had split his L's up to sort of cover numerous objectives, and I kind of just kept my force together. Killed Orifin in one turn of combat by surrounding him with an Arathorn strike, and then after that, it just kind of, to use a phrase that a man once told me, it snowballed. And yeah, I won 7-3. So yeah, really good start. It, however, went downhill.
I'd like to point out at that point, you'd already beaten your own prediction of 0-4 on the first game of the tournament.
Well, that's the thing.
You're also, spoilers, the only one who won in round 1, I think, of it.
Yeah. It was pretty sad after round 1.
And I mean, for me, it was already a great day after that. I was pretty chipper because I was expecting not to win at all. So yeah, it was a good game though. I think that my opponent, the only really misplay he made was the Orifin charge. I think other than that, he kind of did everything he could. It was just kind of tricky to get back in when he lost, like 80 points worth of his army in a single turn and hadn't done any damage. As a result of winning, though, I did then come up against an Azog's Hunters and Azog's Legion army into the death.
Instant karma.
Yeah. I didn't really know what to do, to be honest.
Get back in your hole.
There were 10 berserkers, and about the same hunter orcs, and then it was like a captain and Thimble, I think. it was pretty brutal. I was kind of looking at it going, I've got 3 turns of shooting before he reaches me because of the 8-inch move.
Mhm.
Like it's gonna be horrific, and it's only strength 2 shooting.
Yeah.
The guy I was playing against after we finished was like, I think you misplayed and you should have tried to hold me in like a sort of choke point. But to be honest, I think it would have just prolonged the inevitable. I decided to deploy by wood to try and kind of utilize my woodland creature, but it didn't really work. So I lost 10-0.
Oof.
It was a pretty big oof. Didn't
Yeah.
really know what I could do, to be honest. I think I killed 1 hunter orc with shooting. I rolled dreadfully. Arathor rolled a 1 with his strike against Thimble and died. It was pretty bleak, yeah.
I mean, like the break points for you against Azogs are really poor. Like the fact that they're wounding you on 4s with their basic dudes, and like he just Wait, did he outnumber you, or very similar numbers? I guess.
Yeah, he did outnumber me by a couple models. I think, to be fair, the guy I was playing against was right. I should have choke pointed it because I had the same fight and I had much more might. But as I say, I think that really that would have just prolonged the inevitable because he could have just picked off the hobbits and chewed through me eventually. It would have just been more of a slog and a slower game. Yeah, so that was the second game. Turn 3. Gotta say, my opponent for turn 3 was a bit of a
Game
bellend.
3.
Really disliked the opponent. He was just a horrible guy. Kind of soured the tournament for me, actually. I don't know what it was.
Let's fucking hope you never run into him again.
I don't know what it was about him, but I don't know. He was just really off-putting. Anyway, he was running Fellowship in Lothlorien. Yeah, I mean, bizarre combination. He brought Gimli for some reason. Fuck knows why he was there. And it was kind of a standard game against said opponent because I don't know, we just nothing really happened. We kind of tried to avoid each other because both our lists were just sort of shooting. And then eventually, with a combination of throwing weapons and Gimli, my force just kind of fell apart, and I lost that one. I lost that one 7-2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on.
As I say, though, what an absolute helmet the player was on the Fellowship from Lothlorien side. Yeah. Anyway, final game, Reconnoitre. I came up against the Dead of Dunharrow, a player that OT actually faced in his first round.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a weird game. There was this quite large field and building quite central in the table. He took most of his force with the King of the Dead round one side, so I went, I'll just go the other side then. He left about 6 Army of the Dead, who I think he thought were going to hold, but I chopped through them in 2 rounds of combat and didn't lose a model. And then he got to almost charge range of the hobbits because he had by this time moved around to the other side of the building. But I managed to put a little sneaky heroic march with Holfoot, yeeted my hobbits and rangers, and I think basically he just kind of realized I have no shooting. I have to now turn my whole army back because I'd already killed 6 of his models, and that's a pretty substantial chunk of Army of the Dead at 350 points. So he could either chase me down and hope that he could get enough kills in the kind of 2 turns he'd have by the time he'd caught me, or he could just march off the board. So he just opted at that point to march off the board. We had to call Leon over because we weren't sure what happened. But it turns out that because I'd killed enough that I ended up with double the number marching off.
Yeah.
Because the game doesn't end because no one had been 25'd.
Yeah.
But my opponent was just kind of like, he wasn't really too fussed about it. So yeah, I won that one 5-0. It was a very quick game. I think we were done within half an hour because it was basically just like 5 turns of moving, 2 turns of combat, and then okay, I guess that's it then. Yeah. But there you go. So I finished 2-2. Good tournament, good fun, really enjoyed it.
Incredible result for the
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Very
Just
well, especially the
a
scenarios.
real
as well.
natural talent at the game.
What can I
Yeah.
say? I mean, just fantastic leadership from me, really.
Those Rivendell dice.
Well, it's the One Ring and Fangorn dice that really did it.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd like to thank my parents and everyone who made it possible for me to have done so fantastically well to finish mid-table.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Listeners, are they subscribed?
yeah, and watch this space. GBHL tournament winner soon? Question mark. Probably not.
I mean, maybe. I mean, if you didn't take shit lists, maybe. But
Yeah.
until you refuse to stop taking these garbage lists, you might have a chance.
That is my Achilles heel.
It's 2 wins and then a pity loss in game 3.
Yeah, you threw that one away to make me feel better.
Well,
Yeah.
the guy's just such a bell end. I was just like, you know what? I'd rather just end this game.
Okay, the joke wasn't that fun to begin with. Let's move on. Right. Okay. Next up, should we talk about Sebastian?
To
He's a
talk
nice
about
guy.
me.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Let's let's talk about your tournament first, and we can maybe do the other topic afterwards. But yeah, let's do the tournament first.
So, I mean, first of all 4 games were great games. Really enjoyed all of them. But I think the overall theme was each scenario didn't really pair well with the opposing force that ended up playing. So
I think the picture sums up your tournament quite well, to be honest. Like that really is
clinging on for dear life, huddled together while we get surrounded and trapped, and that is pretty much the tournament.
I was saying to Mer on the way back, it was kind of funny that the one result you had was against the same list as yours, pretty much.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I take that as a personal victory. That it's not the list's fault. It's just bad matchups. So my first game in the capture and control was against as a sort of all Warg list. Had a Warg chieftain and orc captain on Warg. I think I was completely outnumbered. The game basically started with me thinking to myself, look, if I can hold on to 2 or 3 objectives, maybe break my opponent, maybe get lucky and kill the leader, and just those kind of small little wins here and there will hopefully be enough, because there's no way I was going to cover more than 3 objectives against movement 10 list across the board. Unfortunately, it just got more and more clear that getting surrounded and knocked over by wargs with throwing weapons that were rolling a lot of 6s just didn't really go to plan. And unfortunately, the only hero I managed to kill was the orc captain, which in this list wasn't their leader. But I ended up balling up in the middle and basically almost being tabled with a loss of 1-11. Yeah, I mean, it was still a very fun game. Enjoyed it. And going on to game 2, it was to the death. I was feeling a bit more confident in this one. I was like, right, okay, this is what my list is supposed to be really good at, is sticking around, surviving, sort of outlasting my opponent, and keeping that banner alive. And that was against Kingdom of Khazad-dûm, which was basically an exact copy of my list. It was almost model for model. I think my opponent had 3 extra bows, whereas I had 2 Vault Warden teams. And there was like maybe 1 or 2 other guard differences, but we both had a king, we both had a shield bearer, we both had mostly warriors, 2 iron guard was in each list, that kind of thing. So it was very, very even to start with. He had 2 more models than I did, but I was thankful that I in this list had the Vault Wardens, because they proved to be really impactful. Having that strength 4 with the option of piercing against his archers being defense 6 meant that I was wounding on 4s, and it was like, okay, actually that's sorry, not 4, wounding on 5s, and it was really really strong. And I ended up almost tabling my opponent in this game. It was a very close game, but there was 1 or 2 turns where it just I got the priority, I got the traps, and it just kind of snowballed. So yeah, really enjoyable game. Ended up winning that one 6-2.
How much of a factor were the bows in that game? Like, because my assumption would have been that just having a couple of bows would have given them an edge, but like, I guess when they're shooting at such high defense models, maybe it isn't so impactful.
It did force me to go to my opponent. Only having the 1 bow meant that if I was to just sit there and shoot each other,
Yeah.
I would mathematically be at a 4-1 disadvantage. So it forced me to march towards him. So he kind of had that sort of positional advantage. But there was a moment where he put most of his army inside of a house, trying to
Okay.
get the bingo
Oh
objective.
yeah.
Trying to keep his hero, in that doorway to defend it. But there was a
Mhm.
priority where I won, and I could have trapped almost half of his army in that house by
Nice.
sticking a Vault Warden team on him, and
Yeah.
it would have just been like, okay, well, my 1 model is like stopping half your army from doing anything. You'll have to run all the way around it again, because there's no way you're getting through this Vault Warden team. If you do, there's another one.
Yeah.
So I think at that point he kind of went, I have to come out of this house. So he sort of moved out, and I sort of got to react to that. And I think from there, the positional thing was sort of in my favor.
Nice.
So yeah,
Game 3.
Game 3. Game 3, destroy the supplies. This was against not an unusual opponent. We played last tournament. He had Goblin Town, I think.
No, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Didn't have it this time.
This was
No.
of course against Mare and his Rohan list. And going into it, I knew that it was kind of that there was sort of maybe 2 ways of going about trying to get a win in this one. One of them was just to castle up on each of my objectives, on each of my supplies, and just try to break, and maybe get a leader wound or a leader kill. Having thought about that strategy like a little bit more, I kind of thought actually you're just so fast with that movement and being able to march and all that kind of stuff. You would just kind of 100% your army versus a third of my army for 2 or 3 turns, and then you'd get the supply anyway. And
Yeah.
I didn't think that was going to work. So my second strategy was to stick a couple of guys on each of the objectives, kind of see where you're going to go, and try and play the sort of lanes that were on our table, and move up the dwarves in a kind of overwhelming. There's too many of them. Hopefully, you're trying to stop me from getting these objectives. And maybe 1 or 2 of them will seep through, but just being so slow, and I was a bit too piecemealy. I didn't actually commit hard enough to that strategy at the same time, which gave you enough time to kind of heroic combat like all the way around the board, like, and basically go wherever you wanted to, and fight me piecemeal anyway.
Yeah,
And
there weren't really any good options for you, were there? It was move forward and sacrifice your own stuff, or stay back and then I just shoot you.
yeah, because that's the other thing as well. You did outshoot me because your throwing weapons outrange my movement. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a bit of a tough matchup, and especially in Destroy the Supplies.
Yeah.
I almost got very lucky.
You almost did it because you were pushing both sides at the same time, which meant, well, I think one of them was pushing a bit harder, and so I dropped back to deal with that, and then was able to swing round to the other side. At which point you started sending more models to the side that I just defeated, and you were 1 turn away, weren't you, from destroying it?
So yeah, so I got 1 supply in the last turn, and so did you. But I think I was maybe one or 2 turns away from getting to that other objective. But by that time you had managed to kill most of the force that was there anyway. So so that ended up being a 6-2 loss. Ended up losing my king to a few of your heroes.
Yep. Some tasty combats happened that game.
I was almost hoping I would get the sort of banner points, but just wasn't quite to be.
And then game 4, Recon. This is a tricky one.
Yes, another scenario that's great for dwarves. And again, unfortunately, not a great matchup. This was against Mordor. Absolutely lovely player. He was very, very new to the game, and unfortunately, some of his previous opponents hadn't been as on it with letting him know what his rules were. So his army list basically comprised of oh gosh, what's his name? Is it Guritz, the one that gets Burly? No, not Guritz.
Goroth.
Goroth, that's the one.
Yeah.
So we had Goroth and a full warband of orcs, just normal orcs, not Morannons. Basically shields and spears. He then had a captain, just a regular orc captain on foot, with again the same warband, sort of 5 and 6 shield and spear. And then he had Shelob, which was a bit of a problem.
Nice.
I was gonna say, the list. When I saw the list, I was like, okay. I mean, I can kind of deal with the orcs. It's Shelob that's the problem, because not only is she gonna have those brutal power attacks, she's gonna start hurling. She's gonna rend my shield bearer. It was just, there was a lot that he could do with her, and climbing over the terrain would be a problem. So I couldn't really use the bottlenecks to my advantage either. And ultimately, if he really wanted to, he could just tail her all the way off the board, and as long as he sort of gatekeeped me, there's nothing I could sort of get off, and he would win that way. So the strategy going in was to try and break him and hope that he runs away. But that didn't really come into fruition, because I just wasn't killing him fast enough, and Shelob managed to come and kill the shield bearer and his whole warband almost single-handedly, which then allowed his captain and that warband to sort of tail off to the side. I did end up killing most of the force that was left. I did kill Goroth, and so I got some points for that, but ultimately got more, triple the number off, and so the final score was 8-3. But really, really lovely game. So it ended up with 1 win and 3 losses.
Oof.
Wow.
I mean,
not how I thought dwarves would go, but the scenarios did not help.
I think, to be honest, you'd have struggled to get even 2-2. I think with these scenarios would have been a pretty good outcome, because I'm trying to think which of these actually. I mean, I think Recon it's not an auto loss, but it is a tough one. Maybe destroy the supplies if you'd gone against a less maneuverable force, but
another infantry army would have been a bit more sort of 50-50, I think. But
that Mayor's force could just isolate you so easily and just tear through whichever section it wanted to, I guess. So yeah,
I think you got pretty unlucky as well, thinking about your matchups. You come up against Mayor in Destroy the Supplies. If that's to the death, you're probably looking at a slightly more favourable outcome. And the same with Recon. If you come up against the dwarves in Recon, it's a fairly even match. Maybe you have a better chance there. So yeah, I think you got unlucky.
Yeah, I'm going to blame it on that.
No, that's fair. Cool. Right, I'll go through mine. So game 1 was, as mentioned, Onod's opponent from his last game, Dead and Harrow capturing control. This nearly went really well, and it didn't quite work out. So as you can see kind of in the picture, I basically had to just drop really far back to not get killed by them, and it just meant I had 0 board control basically, and I just gradually picked off some of them with shooting. I think I actually killed 6 or 7 of them in the first 3 turns of shooting, which was bullshit.
That's pretty,
it was pretty hot rolling. I've got to say, two shooting heroes with 3 might is really good, especially against Dead Done Harrow, where you can push like with one might point, it goes from 6x4 to a 5x3. Like that's just really nice, and that really helped. Problem was then that my opponent had tagged all of the objectives, and you can't see in this picture either, but the central objective was in the middle of a lake, which meant that he was able to move across it with no impediment, and I would have had to have done a swim test. So that was not ideal. So basically, my opponent tagged all the objectives and then tried to quarter himself. He succeeded. I shielded with all the wood elves I could, but Leggy and Haldir and Gimli just kept killing them, which was not ideal. And then basically, I realised I was going to have to try and table him. So I had the final 2 Warriors of the Dead completely surrounded with my army. I lost one of the combats, which had Gimli and 3 elves in, and then in the second combat, I had Leggy, Haldir, and 2 elves, and they failed to kill the final guy, and then the game ended. So just ran out of time, unfortunately. But yeah, it was a good game, and I think my opponent played it pretty well. Like he just used sort of the defense of his models to get to the objectives, and then just did the right play, which was trying to quarter himself, because I would just have whittled him down over time. So yeah, it was all right. I was a bit frustrated, but yeah, it was fine. Second game was one of... It's not fair to say... No, it was boring. It was boring. People came over to watch our game and then watched for 30 seconds and then walked away because it was just fucking awful.
They could see what was happening.
They could see what was happening. Basically, his entire army hid behind a house for the entire game. He actually laid down about half of his force for most of the game, so they couldn't be shot. And basically all I did was I just gradually pushed my wood elves who had elven cloaks on round the corner and just whittled them down over time, basically picking off like 1 or 2 guys every couple of turns. Then I realised with about 20 minutes to go on the clock that I wasn't going to break him in time. So and he would have won because Silladin counts as a banner. So I had to abandon that strategy and just absolutely charge forward and try and kill as much as I could. Fortunately, Gimli, Haldir, and Leggy were able to get the job done, and I was able to break my opponent and get a few other kill points as well. So it was nice. Used my army's bonus really well, like those elven cloaks, being able to shoot and not being shot back was really powerful. And yeah, Leggy and Haldir did some good work. So yeah, it was fine. Not a game I would look back on fondly, but it was a good tactical battle, as they say.
You didn't give in to feeling like you had to move forward because it felt lame.
Yeah,
and you were like, this feels lame. I'm just gonna run in and see what happens. Like you actually stuck to it, and Onod and I was talking to each other after and being like, it was slightly surprised, pleasantly surprised that you decided to stick to your guns and just do what you probably should have tactically.
Yeah.
It was quite funny to see because at that point, me, May, and Onod had finished our games, and I think this was the same game where Sebastian was facing the dwarfs. We looked at your 2 tables and decided that the both of you were going nowhere anytime soon. So fucked off for lunch.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. It was not a spectacle. Cool. So I was 1-1 at this point, feeling pretty good. I think I'd predicted myself 2-2 before the tournament. So this was kind of as expected. Then game 3 was against this weird Rangers and Shire list. I don't really know what he was going for here. Fucking D3 shield wall. What is he doing? But yeah, I mean, this game was...
I hate him so much.
I mean, I've got to be honest. Like, this game was pretty lame. Like, the only way for me to win was to manipulate the fact I had elven cloaks and Leggy's 2 up and just try and gradually whittle you down. And then basically I just hid Gimli behind a wall the entire game, and then he burst out and just killed like half of your army.
Yeah, I mean, you played it exactly the way you should have done. It wasn't helped by the fact that the board was covered in these like
tiny
fences.
bits of wall and fences.
But like the fences which you could see through, so my guys couldn't shoot you, you could shoot me. So I was just left in this awkward position of having an army that wants to shoot that can't, and couldn't really close the gap because of the way deployment works and just how many guys you could kill with strength 3 shooting. So I managed to make it into the middle of the board because of the rain, but then I was just kind of stuck there, unable to really get out. So it was... Yeah.
I mean, I've got to be honest, like, when I saw we were matching up against each other, I I was pretty sure I was favoured, and like it did just come down to the board. I think if it had been like a very open board, or if there'd been like some really good like or even if there'd been lots of really like line of sight blocking terrain that you could have just like sculpted behind or something. But yeah, it was tricky. You did have some good shooting on my heroes, I guess, but yeah, it wasn't a
I had
vintage
some
game.
shots. I don't think I did any
Yeah.
wounds.
Yeah, you might have done one on Haldir, but yeah. Yeah, and so that was a game. It was an all right game. It wasn't, again, not another one I'll remember like that fondly, but it was fine. Final game was Recon against a 27 model Mordor list with Goroth and Gurit. I got to be honest, like I didn't really see a way for me to win this game because I only had 10 models. Like I don't have March. I don't have the models to spread across the board and try and block. So I just moved up as aggressively as I could to try and combat him early. Problem is with this army is that doesn't work in combat really unless you've really whittled your opponent down. And yeah, he just weight of numbers me down. And I didn't quite get tabled, but I think I only had like Leggy and a Wood Elf left at the end of the game. Goroth, the burly dude from Mordor, is really good at like just a couple of turns of striking up, and he put a couple of wounds on Gimli, a couple of hits on Gimli and stuff, and yeah, it wasn't a great game. Like I think both me and my opponent were a bit tired, and like it was just like we were kind of playing it out because yeah, it was. The scale of the loss was a little disappointing in that it was 1-12, but yeah, it was always the way it was going to go, unfortunately. But yeah, 2-2, not mad. What I predicted, I think what most of us predicted, to be honest. So yeah, it was a solid performance from the list.
Yeah, did pretty well, I think, with the list.
Yeah, considering how weird. Well,
considering
weird.
it's many short. Yeah, it's got a lot of shortcomings.
It's got some
And
shortcomings. Yeah.
I mean, the lack of March is crippling. Like, I actually think if you want to improve the list, you probably swap out Gimli for Boromir because he's got 6 might and March, and that actually gives you some maneuverability. But yeah, I don't think optimizing this list is the way to go. So yeah.
No,
anyway, we'll talk about it more at the end. But yeah. Anyway, let's talk about Mare. Moving away from Goblin Town, bringing Rohan. First game was Capture and Control.
Don't remind me. Yeah, I was reeling, seeing my opponent's force and just relishing the thought of setting Goblin Town upon him. Unfortunately, I had not brought Goblin Town, as has been alluded to. So, first match was against Rivendell. It was against a chap called James. He was very nice. I got the sense that I frustrated him near the end of the game, partly because I'd lost the first. I'd lost was it losing? No, I'd won. Sorry, I'd won like the first 5 priorities, which meant I basically couldn't move in because he would just countercharge me or move up and then move off on the next turn. So I had to skirt around him, and as you can see from this picture, I essentially ended up settling behind a wall in his deployment zone, shooting at him. But he sort of very wisely just skirted around and started maneuvering towards the center of the board, where he took most of the objectives. I had completely forgotten that capture and control is the one where you tag an objective and then move away from it. So I'd like moved a Royal Guard who'd been dismounted away to an objective, but just put him near it, and then started moving him away from it to a different objective that I thought would be better off protecting. And my opponent was like, "You know, you don't have that one, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know. It would be like the end of the game, right?" And he was like, "No, this is the one where you like tag it and it stays yours." So I made that.
How many games of SVG have you played?
Not enough. I usually have enough models to not have to worry about this. Believe it or
it's
not.
true. Goblin Town, it doesn't matter, does it?
No. So I did some nice skirmishing. Elfhelm got some nice throws in, but I was rolling some mad 6s to wound, which I needed to wound these shield wielding elves. I even dismounted his captain with Elfhelm, I believe. So he had a captain on a horse with lance, and then he had the throwing knife one.
Aristor.
That's the one. So, I mean, I did get a nice charge off. I didn't get the combats that I needed, and then it was a case of the elves are matching or higher fight than me on most occasions, and they just kind of whittled me down. Didn't even need to use a strike. Just took me down in numbers. I just didn't have the numbers. So 2-7 loss. The second game was against Louis or Lewis. He was quite new, I think, or fairly new. He said
He
that he
beat me
hadn't had.
last tournament.
He beat you last tournament. Okay, well there you go.
Yeah.
So he'd brought a really
So be
interesting.
careful.
Yeah, he looks pretty innocent, but yeah, maybe he's a secret mega nerd. So he brought Isengard. He brought, like I said, a really interesting list. He had 2 captains. He had some pikemen, some shields, I think. No shields, just berserkers. He had like 4 berserkers,
Wow.
2 Crebain, and then
Oh,
a bomb.
nice. Oh, his
So
model count was what, like 20? No, 15
yeah,
something.
it was around 20.
Okay.
Really, really interesting. And I
Yeah.
was puzzled up until about turn 4. His positioning wasn't amazing, but so I decided rather than, because he didn't have any ranged weapons, you know, I felt a little bit bad because I could have just skirmished around the table and it would have been a really boring game. So I thought I'd make it a bit more interesting, and charged in, did some combats, took out quite a lot of dudes. He won the next priority, and obviously with the bomb nearby, I decided to just let him have it, because at this point he didn't have any flaming brands, and I thought it would be like an interesting little experiment to see if we could get the bomb off. What he was trying to do with a Crebain was really, really interesting. He was using the Crebain to move the bomb because they're infantry and they can
Yeah.
move full. They can move the bomb 12 inches, which, I mean, it
Can you
could be.
march? Could you march with that as well?
Theoretically, you could, as long as your hero's probably going to have to be mounted, though, isn't it, to keep up with them?
Yeah.
So, in theory, you could move them 12 inches towards your opponents. As long as they had priority, you'd then be able to, assuming you don't get shot, try and blow up the bomb with a Crebain. You'd need to pass their awful courage test and then get a 6, so it's pretty unlikely. But we managed to manipulate the board a little bit so that essentially he'd have to take, I think he had 4 or 5 models. Took some video of this, so that'll probably be playing now. He had 3 attempts to blow up the bomb during the game, all of which he needed a 6, having passed 3 courage tests, of course. Highest he got was a 5, didn't quite manage it, but I told him to let me know if he gets the bomb off in the tournament, and in the last game he was on the table next to me, had the bomb next to Boromir, as you can see there, and he did manage to get the bomb to go off. So he rolled 5 wounds as well, so there was no saving that Boromir could possibly do against that. And so that was kind of a nice little ending for his bomb. He brought it with a bit of kind of spicy fun in mind, and I think it hopefully brought that. So that was quite nice. But I did end up winning that game 9-0.
Nice.
So yeah, it was good. Lou was really good. Then we got to destroy the supply against Sebastian, and we've sort of talked about that. Probably not got anything to add, but I think I didn't feel like either of us fully knew what to do. There's a lot of games where I can kind of see what I have to do to win, and in this one I wasn't sure from either of our perspectives what we really should be doing. And I think you'll enjoy Dwarves more, Sebastian, when you get some more practice in and you start to get the hang of what they're meant to be doing, because I honestly have no idea. They're pretty stunted in terms of their maneuverability, so I don't really know what you should have done. But
in terms of their height.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, game 4.
Game 4 was against Angmar, against Thomas. He said he was new. No. Yeah,
But
well,
there
yeah,
were some wargs. There are some wargs in that picture.
I think
there were some
there were
wargs.
quite a lot of wargs actually, weren't there?
No, there weren't. There were the 3 wargs in the picture, and that was it. Then he had a What are the two like annoying ones called from Angmar? The ones that do shit
Warg
with spells.
Chieftain.
No, for fuck's sake. A Spectre and
Barrow White.
Barrow
Barrow
White, yeah. I didn't realize how fucking annoying they were going to be. And Thomas said he was relatively new. And I did make some pretty big tactical blunders, but he absolutely played it perfectly. I sent Deerwine and is it Deerwine? I can never remember. Yeah, Deerwine, not Durnhelm. I always get them confused. I sent Deerwine and Elfhelm up one side of the board where they came across the two spellcaster weirdos, and they pretty much just crippled my cav. He held a little
Yeah.
choke point that I very unwisely charged into. What I should have done is held out until he'd moved forward enough that I can jump forward into his kind of spellcasting range, but after he's already moved, and then do a combat and try and get around his spellcasters. And then if I fail to do that, call a move off in the next turn and hope to get in. But I didn't do that. I just charged up the middle, went straight into him. He paralyzed them, which means they get knocked prone, so they get dismounted, which was horrific. So suddenly, Deerwine's just on the floor. He can't even shield. He just loses the fight. So that was a massive error from my part. Theoden was kind of lurking around the other side where he came up against the wargs. I was hiding on the other side of this building, but at this point I realised that I was definitely going to lose the game on the other side of the board, so I had to do something. So my plan here was to jump forward, which I did after losing priority, and then in the next turn, hopefully win a move off so that I can tag the two wargs, and so I tag the two wargs with my banner and the Roar Guard. The warg and the warg chieftain, and then Theoden will jump onto just the warg and attempt to combat so he can get off the board. Then the other two would just suicide because at this point the other stuff's dead. Because I need to have one model left to 25% myself. That means I have to just Theoden off the board would be my one.
Wow.
So everything else has to die.
Mhm.
And like I said, my plan was to win that move off and do that, but I failed the move off and promptly got surrounded by these wargs who ate everything I had. So I got tabled.
It's the power of those warg lists. They're just so good.
Yeah, the problem stopped.
I mean,
New meta.
it was tough. He played it really, really well. He said that he hadn't played that many games. He only started playing like 2 weeks ago or something. And wow, I'd hate to come up against him in a year when he's actually had some practice.
But he's fully powered up.
Yeah. So enjoyed my games.
Cool.
2-2, as I predicted. You all thought I'd do a lot better, which was, I mean, yeah. It is what it is, but it was good fun.
Yeah. Cool. We'll talk more about like the lists and stuff at the end, but yeah, for now, let's go on to.
I'd also like to say just quickly, thank you to Law for running the tournaments, and I think Liam was around as well, but we won't mention him.
Nice. Okay, Chef. Game 1, capture and control.
Yeah, well, before that, I did not, unlike everyone else, take photos of any of my games. So you're all probably looking at an angry Scottish man right now. Yeah, capture and control. I played Alex in that game, and I've played him, I think, 3 times now. And every time we've played, it's ended up in a draw. And that's exactly what happened this time round. I was having a look at his list before the tournament. It was one of the ones I wanted to avoid because he was taking Isengard. Yeah, I think he had 7 of them, and he deployed fairly far back and straight away. Whereas I was like right up to the objectives because I thought I want to try and tag them. Because if I just sit back and engage in a shooting war, he's likely to win that. It turns out he didn't. He had really bad run with his crossbows. My shooting was actually quite good. I think I killed 3 of his crossbows with shooting, which was quite helpful. So I think we ended the game with me controlling 3 objectives, and I think I wasn't broken. What was game 2? I forget.
To the death against Rangers.
Yes, yeah, and that started horrifically. I think in the first round of shooting, I lost 3 Hunter Orcs, and Thimble took a wound in a really bullshit manner, like 2 in the ways, gets through them, goes up, and then doesn't even have to spend the might, rolls a straight 6, which was incredibly frustrating. But probably a bit of karma for a very bullshit moment that I'll refer back to in game 1, where I had one orc that had done half movement, basically shooting into one of my hunter orcs that was surrounded by 5 guys on the back objective.
Okay.
I rolled a 5 to hit, a
Nice.
roll of 4 on the on the does it hit me, does it hit him, and then rolled a 6 to kill one
Nice.
of his guys surrounding me, and then I won that subsequent combat with a 6, but didn't kill anyone.
Perfect.
I think that was bullshit moment of the day for me. But yeah, back to game 2. Yeah, it started off pretty horrifically, but after that first round of shooting, I think I maybe lost one more model to shooting, and as soon as we got into combats, I kind of ran through these guys pretty quickly. I threw Yazneg and Thimble into a combat together so that I didn't have to strike with Yazneg. And I just heroic combated off of that, and slowly made my way towards Arathorn and the group of rangers that he had on the other side. He kind of spread his force, which I get why he was doing that, to maximize his angles for shooting, but probably wanted to keep them all together, because once they got isolated, it was pretty easy to pick them off. And I think I ended up winning that 10-0 or 11-0 because neither of us had a banner.
I think it was 8-1, but yeah, it was.
Was it?
Pretty,
Okay, yeah, no, massively got that wrong. Yeah, I
it's
can't
a pretty
remember.
convincing win.
Yeah, I can't remember what he must have got a VP for. Oh, for wounding Thimble must have been. Yeah, game 3 was against, I can't remember the guy's name, but
yeah, Isengard destroy the supplies.
yeah, that was. I think that was like the 3rd fight 4 and strength 4 army that I'd faced out of 3 at that point, which was starting to become a bit frustrating. But yeah, I think the guy I played said he was relatively new to the game, and I think that showed in 1 or 2 of his movements. Effectively, he completely abandoned his supplies, and I don't think he had any intention of protecting them. I think he just wanted to get into combat, and if he could push through and try and get some of mine. But I just sent a Warg rider. A Fel Warg. Only had one of them. Just sent that round the side, and no one was close to it. So I knew I was going to destroy all 3 supplies unchallenged. And in the middle, it's just a case of a bit of a cat and mouse chase around this big bit of terrain in the center. And eventually, I sort of feinted him into swinging all his force into one choke point. And I managed to luckily have a couple of guys that I could heroic combat off of into the majority of his army, effectively unchallenged, with the rest of my Hunter Orcs ready to charge in the next turn. And he never really broke through that choke point, unfortunately for him. So I think that was quite a convincing win in the end. I don't know if that might have been an 11-0 one.
It was 9-0, but yeah, again,
9-0.
similar, quite strong.
Getting all the scores wrong. I think it was the last one that was 11-0. I think I won the Recon 11-0.
The last one was 11-0. Yes, I can remember.
There we go. There you go. Yeah. So your game 3 was yeah. I think say the guys sort of being new to the game showed a bit, but it was a really really good game, really friendly guy.
Nice.
And then last game was against Luke, who I think I've played 6 times now in like tournaments and friendly games, and
you always seem to match up against each other. Like it's crazy how often you 2 play.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating because I've never beat him. Like he's really good, and he always has armies that counter mine really well. I think the last time we played each other in a tournament, I took Defenders of Helm's Deep, and he took Phaedrid's Guard, and he just had that cav movement that was able to counter what I had. But yeah, no, really nice guy, really good player. But this matchup was really unfavourable for him. He had Dead of Guns, Harrow, Reconnoiter, and I had the movement. I had more models. I didn't do too much with the shooting. I killed one guy, but I was just moving my Hunter Orcs with bows up like 3 inches every turn, because like, well, if I kill one guy or 2 guys, I'm suddenly outnumbering him 2-1 in combats if possible, if he's charging me or if I pass courage checks. And the Dead of Dunharrow being fight free was a massive boost for me. Because it was the first time I actually matched fight value that day, and the Huntrocks were rolling hot in the game. I mean, if I was winning combats, I was killing, I'd say 90% of the time. It was really fortunate because in a lot of cases I had 4 dice to wound.
Yeah, and you only need 6s, don't you? Because you're strength 4, which is actually quite nice.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And Thimble, I think he killed quite a few guys by himself because he was managing to pass courage checks most of the time. I think I had to spend 1 will point with him. I think he actually only has 1, but that was in like right towards the end of the game when it didn't really matter. But yeah, I spent like I think 2 points of might with him just to kill guys because it seemed worth it. I outmighted him massively, so I didn't really need it for moves or anything like that. I got quite lucky with the VPs though because on his last turn he had 1 Dead of Dunharrow face a courage test, fail a courage test, and I think that meant I ended up tripling him. If he'd have got it through, I think I would have been 1 off tripling him. So that was quite fortunate for me, but yeah, just a really unfavourable matchup for Luke in that situation.
Nice. Cool. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
and that was it.
Yeah, nice. Smash. And 3 was that 3 wins, a draw, and no losses. Nice.
Correct.
Yeah, smashed it. Right.
Pretty good.
I reckon, Onod, how did you feel about your list, and will you be playing it again?
Yeah, it kind of did what I wanted it to do. I personally kind of feel like the Rangers and the Shire go quite nicely together. They kind of do what the other one doesn't, as it were. I think that they will be better with a different tournament pack. So getting Halbrad's banner would be nice. I probably will do this again. I think that I'm more inclined to play a Shire list with Ranger allies than I am the Legendary Legion, just because the Legendary Legion is just so brutal. But yeah, it's definitely got its weaknesses and they're quite glaring. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun. And I will definitely play it again at some point.
How did you find Halbarad? No, not is it Halbarad? No,
Arathorn.
Arathorn. Sorry.
He's difficult to manage. Some games he was good in combat, others he just died in a single turn. I think that the more I play the list, the more conservative I am with him.
Yeah.
So I think I'm coming to the conclusion that basically you've just got to try and avoid any hero with strike with Arathorn and just use Arathorn to kind of try and kill enemy warriors and that sort of thing. Because the best game for him over the weekend was the first one where he killed Orothan, who didn't have strike.
Yeah.
And then he just sort of yeeted through some warriors down the middle of the board, and I kept him away from Haldir. So he was actually really useful in that game. Whilst in the other games, he never really got to do much at all. Well, I mean, he killed a couple of ghosts in the final game, but yeah, I think that's where he's most useful. And I think it's just sort of the list. Just kind of you just have to ignore the big heroes and just sort of focus on the objectives. But yeah, he was alright.
Because it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because he's your only hero with strike, which means normally, if there was a hero with strike, you'd probably want to send him at that hero so you have a chance of killing them. But the problem is if you fuck up the strike roll, he will just die because he's 2 wounds and 1 fate, isn't he?
Yeah,
and he's only D5, so he would just get fucked up.
I think he's fine, kind of like in an emergency situation.
Yeah.
To like if that's a gamble, it's the only way to do stuff. But I think actually from all the games that I was playing, the most consistent way of killing a hero was to trap them and just hope that they rolled poorly.
Yeah.
Like when I played a practice game against Mare, like that's how I took down all his heroes because Arathorn died immediately. It was just trap the Rohan heroes, they only have 2 attacks when they're not charging, so there's a good chance they don't roll well enough. They've had to use all their might on move offs, and then I just kind of outgrind and do it that way. And I think Arathorn actually is more useful just as a kind of source of might and putting him into warriors. So yeah, I think the more I play him, the more I'm gonna kind of avoid strike offs if possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Oh well, there you go. He overperformed and he enjoyed it. It's a fucking
It's a
success.
miracle.
You love to
A
see it.
Christmas
Yeah.
miracle.
I'm going to stop short of loving to see it. I feel kind of ambivalent about it. Let's come to Sebastian next. Did you enjoy your list, and will you be playing it again?
I definitely enjoyed the list. The list was like playing Casa Doom is something I've not done very much before at all, and having that kind of slightly forgiving army was actually quite refreshing because I'm used to playing elves, which is very glass cannon. Like small mistakes can cost you a lot, but in this list, it was very much like oh, I'm trapped. Oh well, like
There's nothing
fine,
I can
that's
do.
lucky. And yeah, it was nice playing against those strength 4 armies and going, oh yeah, you still need a 6. That's
Sixes.
quite cool.
Yeah.
But I think the strengths of the list were very much the same with any kind of dwarf list. But I found that at this points level, just being on the cusp of low model, sort of being that 2/3, 20 out of
Yeah.
30 possible, was slightly difficult, and the lack of fast moving models, even despite having March in the list, the March never really felt worth it, especially with the low might. Taking the shield bearer as well didn't make as big of an impact as I wanted. I didn't come against anything that was really causing terror except for Shelob, but I never had to charge her once because she charged me.
Nice.
But it was he died quite often. Having 2 wounds, no fate. Just didn't quite pull his weight. Like the hurt combat, I found to be very difficult to micromanage. The fact that he has to be within 3 of the king, and then he has to go as close as possible to the king. Once his combat's successful, that's very difficult to manage in an effective manner. So in my head,
Because it's not the closest combat, is it? It's just he has to move as close as he physically can.
Yeah, so that might mean that he actually avoids somebody to then
To
go
move around them.
next to the king, and sometimes that even traps the king. So it's actually quite hard to micromanage. So I don't think I'm quite skilled enough to use him effectively. And so yeah, I would definitely play them again. I think maybe a higher points level take a hero that actually does something a bit more for the list, like the Durin or
Balin.
King's
Like
champion.
anyone.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I'll definitely play it again at some point, but
Nice.
I'm not sure when.
Okay, fair enough. Cool. Right, I'll ask myself the question. Did I enjoy it? Am I going to play it again? No and no are the answers to both of those. This was not an enjoyable experience to play as a list. You have to play in a way that is very slow and relies on not engaging with your opponent, and 90% of the time, all I was doing was trying to move in such a way that I was obscured by the smallest possible amount of terrain, and that meant that I could still shoot my opponent. And yeah, the games I won were the games where I just outmaneuvered my opponents and shot them, and like that just felt a bit lame. And I think similar complaints to the complaints I had about Riv Knights when I was playing them came up here. Like, it's just not the way I enjoy playing SBG. Like, the most fun I had was when Gimli got to charge into combat and mess stuff up, and everything else felt a bit lame. So
And you got to play dwarves.
yeah, when I got to dwarf singular.
Dwarf.
But yeah, like I will say though, like Leggy and Gimli as a combination is really good. Like they complement each other so well, and like when Gimli is running around with the option to piercing strike with 3 attacks, and he already gets +1 to wound from Leggy, like he's just like a more survivable Dwalin. With 3 might, and he does feel really powerful. So that was good fun. Haldir was fine, like having him just float around, a couple of shots a turn, and he had strike, and that was always quite useful. But like not having any armor on my heroes was just not the one. Like the big D4, like Haldir got killed by like 2 Morannon, and they just both, because they were wounding him on 4s, and I was just like, yeah, well, he's fucking dead, isn't he? So yeah, it was fine, and like my games were kind of fun, but I just have no desire to play the list again. Mayor, did you enjoy your list, and will you be taking it again?
I might take a version of it at a higher points
Is
level.
that version Goblin Town?
How did
Yes,
you know?
it is.
I think I might be having an Isengard Renaissance at some point, to be honest.
Yeah, I did wonder. Yeah.
So
Will they be shaped like goblins? 2 goblins in a trench coat, maybe?
I'm actually going all wargs.
Oh,
Good choice. Finally. Finally.
I've seen the light.
The Wolves of Isengard coming soon.
Yeah. I think I didn't. I mean, I'm used to having full board control, and I really felt the lack of board control. The mobility doesn't inherently give you board control, but if you can't threaten with that mobility, and while I could threaten with that mobility, you know, it worked against Sebastian, it worked against Isengard. It didn't work against elves, which I was partly surprised by. But just, you know, as soon as your opponent has any fight 5, you're pretty screwed. You know, my heroes are base fight 5, my dudes are fight 5 if they're charging. I lose a couple move offs and I die. It's very swingy. I think you need the volume of dudes behind the heroes. So if I want to engage half of the enemy army, I want to be able to do it with all of my army. And while I think in smaller point games, you can't really engage half of your opponent's army unless they split them up. And at larger points, I think you can maybe take more advantage of being able to split up your opponent because they physically won't be able to have everything in one place. I do have a lot more Rohan models that I need to paint up, so in future I think I might take, let's say, up to 600-700 points worth of Rohan, 3 or 4 heroes and dudes, 20 to 25-30 models or something like that. Could be pretty nice. I don't think I'd expect to do particularly well with it, but I think it is fun, and I would certainly do it again.
Nice. Okay. So some positives out of perhaps not necessarily the most positive experience. Cool. I guess we'll come to Chef, and then we might do like an MVP and an LVP like we did in the last tournament review. So we'll do Chef first, and then we'll come back to those in a second. But
yeah,
Chef,
I'll probably have to jump off after this bit. But yeah, did I like my list? Would I take it again? Yeah, I did. I've used Hunter Ops before, but not solely as Ogs Hunters. I've taken them in pits. I think actually just in pits of Dol Guldur, but they are just fun. Yeah, they're squishy, but I mean, 2 strength 4 attacks on a warrior model is great.
really good.
The heroes are excellent. Yasnik didn't do too much. I was kind of forced into taking him because I don't have Narzug. If I was going to take it again, I'd 100% take Narzug instead of Yasnik. I think because I had 12 bows in that list, having Narzug with the bow and with, I think it's a free might during the shooting phase. That's quite good. So yeah, I think I'd probably switch that out. But other than that, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I would take it again. I think Hunter Orcs, I'd feel comfortable taking up until about 500 points. I think once you go beyond that, you've got to take Azog really. And if I'm taking Azog, I'm going to be using pits of Dol Guldur or Azog's Legion. Not going to take him in an Azog's Hunters list. So yeah, did enjoy it. It's hard not to enjoy a list that gets you second. But yeah, no, I do think it's a very enjoyable list. I think a couple of people had Azog's Hunters at the tournament. I think there was maybe 3 people, maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah, it was pretty logical at this point, wasn't it? Like, especially with the cap on heroes and the model count, like you came in with a decent model count and with 2 good heroes with both had strike, I think. It's just a really solid list, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, both heroes having strike, having 12 bows, strength 4. I mean, there's a lot of ticks there, isn't there? Yeah, I mean, I think all the positives you get from that list far outweigh the negative D4. I think quite comfortably, in fact. I don't think you need a banner. I think what a banner's worth, effectively, you'd have to take out 4 Hunt Orcs to get a banner, and I don't think it's worth it for Fight 3 guys.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially at this low point. Maybe if you went to 500, might be worth it. But yeah, like just the extra dues at this points level, I think is more valuable.
Yeah, completely agree.
Nice.
And you played it really well.
Yeah, smashed it.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Right. We'll quickly do MVP and LVP, and then we'll talk about how we performed and how we predicted. So, who should I come to first? Onod, you've had time to think. Who's your MVP? Who's your LVP?
What do I do in this section?
Pick your best one and pick your worst model.
Um.
Fucking hell. Okay.
I
Does
don't
anybody
really
have
know.
theirs ready to go?
I wasn't expecting to do this.
He
I
was
can
talking
do
about it.
Oh, I haven't done one of these in a while, have I?
Well, did you not listen to last episode? Sebastian, did you say you had one?
Yeah, I'll do mine.
Okay, right. Sebastian, you go then. Well, Onod can think about what he's done.
So I think the model that I think I was disappointed by the most is probably the Shield Bearer.
Oof.
What a fucking surprise!
Yeah,
What did you expect?
I mean, I was hoping he would just kill 1 or 2
Go through
warriors
chaff.
a turn, but
Yeah.
the 2 attacks just didn't actually cut it, and he just ended up bouncing off of a lot of stuff. But my MVP would probably be the Iron Guard.
Oh,
Ooh,
okay.
surprising.
Interesting.
Yeah, there were a lot of moments when having those 2 attack strength 4 was just very strong, and actually there was a moment where an Iron Guard managed to kill someone with his throwing axe, and managed to trap the opposing Dwarf King leader and get those extra attacks, because those 2 attack strength 4 doubled. It's just really, really strong. And still being defense 6 means that they're pretty survivable. Should anything sort of go against them, but yeah, I think they were very strong.
Can they
Wow.
pierce?
I learnt this at the tournament. They cannot pierce because
Have
they
daggers,
Oh,
don't they?
swords.
they have daggers and throwing axes, so they can't use their
Ah.
throwing axe as a melee weapon, which is a bit bizarre.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, why would you
So
do that? It's
did
for
you try and
throwing.
pierce, and your opponent was like, actually, or did
Yes.
you
I
just
think
look at?
I think you'll find.
Yeah, it was in the mirror match where I asked my
Okay.
opponent. I was
Fair
like,
enough.
"Oh, are we going to always pierce with this?" And he said, "Actually, you can't do that." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Damn. Sucks. Okay. Okay. Cool. Oh, the Iron Guard choice is yeah, fair enough.
I think it's cool.
Yeah. Nice. Mayor, do you have an MVP and an LVP?
I think annoyingly, even though counterintuitively I would never take him again, it would be Elfhelm. Every time I take him, I think to myself, this guy's not got strike. He's not got march.
He's fucking useless. He's so selfish.
Useless. But then he'll just his wounding with the thrown weapon is just
Yeah,
really consistent.
so fucking good. I mean, throwing weapons are fucking good anyway. Like buffing them is just crazy.
Yeah, it just made that much more reliable, and it just annoys me that he's good because I don't want to take him. I think my least valuable would be Deerwine, because
okay.
in this particular tournament there were a lot less. There were a lot less opportunities for ganking heroes with the heroic combat. I think I called more heroic combats with his actual might than free combats, just because of the position that Theoden ended up being in. I couldn't. It was to no benefit to do the free one. So I think I would. He does have strike and march, which is really nice. But I think I might take Dernhelm instead in future. Does she have march? I can't remember.
I don't think she does.
No, she does not.
So it'd only be Theoden with march, which is kind of annoying. But weirdly,
Gambling.
Gambling. Obviously, in this tournament, I wasn't able to take him because of the points limit, but gambling certainly in future.
Or
Maybe
a
that
generic
makes
captain.
a what? Just a generic captain.
Generic captain is pretty good.
Yeah. I've seen them quite a lot actually. In the larger Rohan lists. So potentially that, maybe a captain, Theoden, and then gambling, and then dudes. Maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. But yes, that's it for me.
Cool. Onod.
I think my least valuable just has to be Arathorn. He didn't really do anything especially bad. But I think for a leader, he's just too flimsy. And actually, in a lot of situations, he was costing me victory points very,
from leader wounds, or
just leader wounds, because people could just shoot him with a bow. And for my most valuable, I'm going to give an honourable mention to Holfer, who isn't going to win, but I do just want to say that his heroic march actually, I think, won me the Reconnoitre game and enabled me to, I think, surprise my opponent to contest a objective in the first game and somewhat give me a bit of an edge. And certainly, I think without that, I would have only won that game 5-4. So he was really useful. But I think actually the best were just the regular Dunedain.
Okay.
And they were just so solid. 2 attacks, they could spear support, which gave me lots of flexibility. So, like for the ghost, for example, not needing to necessarily charge inside the spears was really useful.
Remind me, do they have 2 attacks base?
It's the army bonus. So as long as it's a historical ally, they will have 2 attacks whilst on foot. Yeah.
Wow.
And actually, they're really surprisingly survivable. That fate point just really kind of adds quite a lot of survivability. And I think with only one game being against the Azog alliance, if you take that game out, I think I only lost about 3 in the whole tournament.
Okay.
I mean,
So
they're a pain in the ass to shoot because, like, often, you get that wound through on like a 5 or a 6 or whatever. Well, mostly a 5. But like 50% of the time, that's not good enough, and like you have to go back again, and that feels super annoying. That, like, obviously they don't all have 2 wounds, but in a lot of cases they do have 2 wounds, and that does just make it more of a deterrent to shoot them.
Yeah, and fight for 2 attacks. They just kind of for a lot of the lists that I ended up playing, it was just a bit too much for them. And it's just again just a case of I just want that banner now rather than Arathorn.
Yeah.
I want Halbrand
Are you strength
so
4
that
as
I
well?
can banner it. Yeah, they're strength 4. They're actually really good.
Yeah.
Courage 4's not like insane, but I think it's just having that might point. Because like I was doing stuff like in one game against the elf player, I just call like 3 heroic combats with 3 individual ones. And just suddenly he was like, oh, like all I had to do was kill a wood elf, and suddenly I could like yeet these guys like 6 inches towards objectives and stuff. And it was just really nice to just kind of utilize them in lots of kind of interesting ways. And I think actually kind of bizarrely for a list which I think everyone was kind of thinking of a shooting list, actually they were really good in combat. And I think I actually spent most of my time in combat, probably just down to the scenarios, but
What's fairly surprising.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the hobbits were just kind of mid. They did their job. They provided me with a higher break point.
I mean, the fact they did their job at all was
they were
pretty
useful.
impressive for hobbits.
They were useful for getting traps. They were good for screening the Dunedain because I was essentially just using them as like an extra wound for the Dunedain when it came to like a shooting matchup. They just stood in front. And they were fine. They didn't ever lose me a match, so can't really complain.
Cool. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, when I've played your Grey Company, like, just having the ability to call so many heroic combats, because it's not like all your might centralized, right? I guess it's like the Merry Pippin thing with Boromir, like just being able to have multiple heroic combats going on at once is quite a lot to deal with, and it does make the list a lot harder to manage. So yeah, cool. For me, MVP and LVP, they're both going to be Wood Elves. The
And they're both
LV
woodless.
No, the LVP was Wood Elf with throwing daggers. And the reason is that if your opponent is close enough for you to be using the throwing daggers, or you are using them to charge into combat, depressingly, I think, and this is not a blanket, well, it is a blanket statement, but like, if you're aiming to go into combat with this list, I think something's gone wrong, essentially. Like, and I think the throwing daggers they cost me like 6 points. And if I dropped them and a couple of spears, I could have had another dude. And I think if I'd had one more dude, it sounds a bit silly, but I think the list would have stuck around a bit better. And I just, yeah, I don't think the throwing daggers synergize with what makes this list good. So I would have dropped them. The MVP, though, is the Humble Wood Elf with Elf Bow, because they literally did the majority of the killing in this tournament for me. Like, the ability to move into positions and not be shot, and like, especially, and I think we've said this before, like, woodland terrain is by far the most common terrain, and the fact that they can move freely through woodland terrain and not be shot and shoot out from it is completely infuriating for your opponent to deal with, and just does give you so many more options. So yeah, but I think that would be my MVP and LVP. Heroes did their job for the most part. Haldir was flimsy, but like has like really good potential upside. And yeah, Leggy I really enjoyed. Like, I think he's just a fun hero to use. Not he feels. I mean, he is super flimsy, but he is kind of fun. And Gimli's just good fun. Like, really solid, does the job.
Can't go wrong with Gimli.
Can't go wrong with Gimli. And I think he's slightly expensive. I think he could be slightly cheaper, and it would be fine. But yeah, I think he's good fun. Cool. Let's talk about how we did and predictions and crap. So, final standings were: Chef went 3-1-0, came second. Me, Mare, and Onod all went 2-2. I was actually most average. I came 17th. I'm pretty proud of that.
Prize and everything.
Got some more fucking Rivendell dice for the collection.
I can't believe that was the prize.
Because I think we all clocked, didn't we? We were like, oh shit, it's dice. And I was like, there's no fucking way. Like, there's no way it's going to be more fucking Rivendell dice. And then it was. And yeah.
Obviously, think you need some help.
Yeah, like, I'm obviously super happy to have more dice, obviously, but I think I don't know if I'll sell them. I might keep them, but we'll see how we go. I don't think I need 16 Rivendell
Sell
dice
your
in
old
my life.
Rivendell dice.
Yeah.
Keep
No,
those
because you
ones.
should. Yeah. Well, if they start letting me down, maybe I could break out the second set.
Just to threaten them with.
Yeah. But yeah, I think in terms of like comparison to our predictions, I think so. Like, the average prediction basically was like, I think on average we said Mare was going to go like sort of like 2 wins and a draw. And then we thought Chef would. I think our average was pretty much like 3 wins and a draw. You three all predicted him to go 4-0, which is pretty ballsy. He was pretty close to that, to
He
be
was
fair. He
pretty
was only like
close.
one VP away
He
from
couldn't have
going
got any
4-0.
closer without getting it.
Yeah. Then we were all pretty much bang on for me. We all said 2-2, apart from Onod, who said 2-1. Well, two wins and a draw. Yeah, we slightly over predicted Sebastian, unfortunately. And then we were slightly pessimistic on Onod. The
Very pessimistic.
shit. I mean, we gave Chef crap for his 2-2 prediction, but it turns out he knew something we didn't. Clearly, I'm not sure he believed his prediction, but it did come true.
Yeah. It was obviously very wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
I think
Even
I
Onod
was
doesn't know how it happens.
possessed by a ghost that was
The
good
spirit of a competent player. Oh gosh. Yeah. Are we interested in seeing who predicted best? I have worked it out, but we don't have to talk
Is
about
it you?
It is me.
Fuck off then. I don't want to know.
Can you just put it on the screen? But
Can I
we
just
don't
say that
actually
I
know
predicted
it.
myself right, and that's all I care
You
about.
did. You did. Onod was by far the worst, and I was the best. Is the headlines basically?
Who was second best?
It was equal between Mayor and Sebastian for second,
Ooh.
and then Chef.
It's almost
was
like
in
we're related.
that
Wait, you
connection.
guys are related?
I said almost.
It's the deep lore. Yeah. I mean, so basically, Onod really screwed himself with his own prediction.
Did you
he was
predict 0 and 4?
he was the only person who predicted himself to go 0 and 4, and then proceeded to actually do really well. Yeah.
Damn.
So have a little more faith in yourself.
Yeah.
No, I should have just played worse.
I see. You should have just thrown your games to get your prediction.
Exactly.
You did travel quite far for that tournament, considering you
Yeah.
thought you were just going to go 0 and 4. I'm going to travel 5 hours each way to
was just
fucking
there for the
lose 4
vibes,
games.
you know.
You
Yeah.
really were.
No wins, just vibes.
That's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. No,
What
it
they
was
call
good.
him.
It was good. Overall thoughts on the tournament? I'll go first. I thought it was another really nice day. I thought this was one of the less seriously taken tournaments I've been to. I think this was
In a
had-
nice way.
yeah, I think this was more relaxed, which I very much enjoyed. I think the scenarios were slightly unfortunate, but there's nothing you can really do about that. I think it did screw over a couple of lists, but I really enjoyed all the opponents I played, and yeah, good vibes.
Yeah, thanks, Law, for putting on a really nice tournament, and
Whoever else
enjoyed
was there.
it. It was well run, as per.
Yeah.
Prizes were fun. The bingo, which we haven't mentioned, was really good.
Oh yeah.
We had some Malwam treats if you got some bingo prizes for whether you had a magic power that you resisted and stuff. I think there might have been some small oversights in that, or maybe it was just one of my opponents, but Lewis or Louis, who was playing the Isengard bomb, we worked out that he could only actually score one row. And bearing in mind that you could also go diagonally, and this was like a 5x5 grid.
It's pretty
that was
unlucky.
pretty impressive. Yeah,
I had the same issue with my list. I think I could only score maybe 2 max, but
Wow.
never mind. Yeah, it was really good. It was by far my favorite tournament that I've been to yet. I've never been to
wow.
Worcester one before, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was
You'll
really
be coming
good.
again then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I think you have just got unlucky with some tournaments, though. To be fair, like you both in like the armies you've played and like the standard of some of the events that was just higher than we expected it to be. So yeah, I think
maybe, but even ones which have been like more fun, like I've just never really like got the vibe of them being fun. Like they've always just kind of felt a bit, I don't know.
maybe that's a you problem.
Yeah, probably to be fair. Yeah.
Is it
So-
partly because you also did quite well this tournament? Did
Oh,
that add to the enjoyment?
power gamer Onod coming out. Here we go. He fucking practiced, by the way. Like,
did.
I'm fucking dropping that one in.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it was taking a better list this time that made the difference.
To be fair, it's the most list that you have
Yeah.
at the moment.
That's not true. I have a hammerhead,
Oh, yeah.
the hammerhead shark himself.
I would like to say how fucking disappointed I was when I found out you were practicing. I actually
It was
felt
more
slightly-
that we just fancied a game in the evening.
no, none of this. No, don't make excuses for him. Don't make excuses for him. I'm on a disappointment phase here. Like,
But you're not disappointed in me for playing against him.
No. You're allowed to. You're a ruthless power gamer. But Onod
Can we
was
just drop in that I did actually beat Mare in the practice game as well?
Yeah, you did. You tabled me. That's
I did, yeah. That fucking Ranger Shiloh's table Mare.
you did. It did.
It's because I subbed in a few wargs.
I'll bring a proper
Yeah.
list next time.
Oh, here we
Wow.
go. Smack talk
Wow.
begins. This is how we get
All
to
wargs is the
2,000
proper list he's going to bring.
This is how we get to 2,000 stubs, starting beef with ourselves. Sebastian, how did you find the tournament?
Yeah, I think it was really good. I mean, it's like most of the events in Worcester. To be honest, I think it's just been a very solid event all round. Really nicely designed. Had lots of little fun side quests, I'll call them, on the bingo. And yeah, I mean the player base and community as well was really friendly. I think it was really smooth throughout the day as well. Like nothing went wrong, nothing was late. Plenty of prizes as well. There were lots of great stuff hobby wise available. So there were your best army, and also there was a separate category where you could enter a single hero, which was unnamed, which I think was very on theme for the tournament itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it was a great event.
Yeah.
And can I
Nice.
just say that Worcester really is the jewel of the West Midlands?
Onod was feeling really guilty about his park comment.
They call it the Faithful City for a reason. It's just a wonderful place.
Honestly, you're so full of shit. Like, Jesus wept.
the ambiance.
Fucking takes a stance and immediately backs down under the weight of public pressure. Like, pathetic.
No, I fully stand by my comments.
I regret nothing.
And I don't think there's anything wrong really with saying that it's the jewel of the West Midlands. I think that
it's
goes
probably
perfectly hand
accurate.
in hand with my previous statements. That's right, my beef is with the whole of the West Midlands now. Bring it on.
Okay, right. Well, I'm not sure if I'll cut that, but we'll see how generous I'm
You're not
feeling.
going to.
No, I'm not. No, because
You have some agenda
it's
against
funny
me.
and has no impact on me, so it's staying in.
Big love to the West Midlands.
Guys, it's such a fucking roller coaster. Right, cool. Well, I think that'll do for today. Thank you very much for listening. Well done if you've made it this far, because this recording is now an hour and 40 minutes long. And I don't know how much of this will have survived in the cut.
Maybe 20 minutes in the
edit. I'll just do every fifth word. Okay. Cool. Well, I've been joined by Onod.
Bye.
Give me strength. Okay. Sebastian.
Thanks for listening.
Meh.
And see you next time.
So slick. And I've been OT. And Chef was here as well.
Just cut in what he said earlier. Just completely
out of context.
Slap it in.
Yeah. Cool. Well, like and subscribe. Ding our bell. Join the Patreon. And we'll see you for the next one.
Bye.